It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Good morning, Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, we're speaking with a leading expert in environmental compliance for manufactured products as we continue our interviews with the Automotive Industry Action Group. More on that in just a moment. A quick programming note before we get started here. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Okay, so let's welcome in my fearless, esteemed co-host on today's show, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, good morning.
Good afternoon, morning, day, night. This time it's really hard to tell, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Great to be here. Yeah, love what Jim and the folks at AIAG are doing, and glad to talk to Michael today. So
Absolutely. Let's do that. So I want to welcome in our featured guest for today's episode, Michael Wurzman, founder and president at RSJ Technical Consulting. Michael, how you doing?
Doing great today. Staying healthy.
That's good. That's moved up on the priority list here these days, and great for you to be with us and looking forward to learning more about your story. So for starters, Michael, you know, we typically like to get a sense of the character we're interviewing here. So tell us more about yourself and give us a couple of tidbits from your professional journey.
Okay. Well, I've been involved in environmental type concerns since high school when I was the co-director, whatever, organizer, I guess I would put it, of our high school protest the first year that Earth Day went national. Got gas masks on, protesting the air quality during the time of the formation of the EPA. And that has stayed with me all my life, and I've been going through as an engineer, had sort of a unique approach. I was this rare engineer that believed you needed to understand the political process, and got a degree I wanted to call political engineering, which of course in the time of Watergate was not quite approved in that name. But we saw where things were going during the energy crisis in '73. And little did I know what I studied then would actually become full-time many years later. But in pursuing the route, I had left the corporate world when my daughter, who has Tourette's, needed more attention. And I left so I could structure my business work around her and family, and formed my company back early '91 called it RSJ Technical, where RSJ are the initials of my three kids. And so
and all of their three names, Michael, are?
It's Rachel, Stephanie, and Joshua.
Rachel.
And those are, we trying to decide how we should use them for a name. It was decided chronological order was definitely best.
Yeah, like everything else with your children, that's the only way that can even be seen as remotely fair, right?
Absolutely. Each one is totally unique, and they were all willing to agree on that, even though they were quite young at the time.
So Michael, this might be before Scott was even born. But you referred to a time when, if I recall, I was a kid at the time, there were gas lines, right? Is that when you're talking about 73-ish or whatever? I don't remember the exact year, but I recall my father getting a Christmas present, a T-shirt that I spent my vacation at the gas station.
Right. That was the in '73 was the oil embargo when we had the crisis. Gas prices more than tripled, went up to a whopping 75 cents a gallon, and slightly higher in areas. And I was in Purdue at the time and on the debate team, and we were debating the energy crisis. And I looked, and we had to study all this legislation and everything going on, and the official goals of the country were to be an non-oil dependency within 30 years. And then I watched all the legislation that came through that guaranteed that we were going to be dependent on oil for a lot further in the future. Mm. And that's when it spurred me to understand and realize this connection between legislation, which, in this area I'm dealing with now is compliance, and the role governments have, people have, how it all happens, so you can look at what's there and get a better feel for what goes forward or what to expect.
Right.
Yeah, that was the time.
So I wonder if you ever, sorry, I don't mean to derail us too much, Scott, but I wonder if you might have ever debated against Southwest Missouri State University. Do you ever recall that?
I don't think we...
Just curious.
I don't recall that.
My father was the debate coach at Southwest Missouri State, so I bet I feel a bit like your children, which is you can't win an argument even if you're right. My father, because I can out debate you.
Well, I don't have that situation because my son went on in debate.
Oh, okay.
And has been a debate coach, and there's no way I'm going to win an argument there. He is so far ahead of whatever I was able to do.
Outstanding.
So before Michael, before we talk more about RSJ Technical Consulting, and if anyone, I can certainly appreciate and blessed be the ties that bind. We always find how small the world is with each of these podcast interviews. I love the common threads on the debate world that we have between your two collective families. But let's talk about, when you think about these pivotal moments in your journey that really helped frame up your global view on things. Clearly, the first Earth Day and the energy crisis were some early, big, influential events in your journey. When you think about what you did prior to launching your firm, is there a role that sticks out that really helped shape how you view the world?
Absolutely. Back in 2000, actually April 26th to be exact, we had a gas pipe break in our house due to faulty construction 15 years earlier. And the house blew up, burnt down, actually made the national news under the title, Blown to Bits.
Wow.
And from that whole disaster, luckily no one got hurt. It was just lost virtually everything we owned. But while the firemen were tamping out the fire, I asked one of them, why, when there's no visible smoke, are you wearing all that protective gear? And the guy said, you see all your neighbors sitting around smelling that kind of sweet smell with the smoke? He said, that's all carcinogenic, toxic materials they're breathing. If we were exposed to that on a daily basis, we would have cancer in no time at all. And that's why we have to cover and protect our entire bodies and be using the breathing apparatus, even though you don't see any flame or smoke coming, because it's still coming out of this mass. And as I, just offhand said, man, I really appreciate everything you did trying to save stuff. I mean, obviously not much could be done. I said, I wish there were a way to thank you. And he turned to me and said, yeah, if you could help get rid of all these toxic substances from building products, that would be the best way to thank us.
Wow.
And it was just sort of a side comment that he tossed out, but it was in the back of my mind. And then that got me aware of just how much toxic substances were in products, which, of course, being creative, I started doing a little bit of research following and realized the problem. And 3 years later, my brother-in-law was having trouble doing this reporting to the automotive industry for one of his clients, his biggest client, and danger. He said, Mike, you're an engineer. My guys are having trouble with this. Do you think you could do some work in the evenings on the side and help me out? How do you say no to family, right?
Right.
And so I jumped in. I took a training and started doing it and developed a knack. And fact, his customer loved the work. And then the next thing I know, his customer asked him, would you mind if we contacted the guy who's helping you? Because we got problems, we need help. And the next thing I knew, instead of a sideline at night, I decided to make this my day job.
Wow. So, Michael, I tell you, to come back from that huge disaster and become a successful entrepreneur, we're going to have to dedicate a second episode just to talk about those leadership skills and that perspective, because that would spell doom in the end for many folks. That was such a devastating setback. So we're going to have to bring you back on for that. But let's pivot, because clearly that moment and the couple of years that followed formed the genesis that led to RSJ Technical Consulting. So Greg, I know we've got some questions around his firm.
Well, yeah. So I want to start with one thing, and that is, I wonder if you ever circled back with that firefighter to let them know the inspiration that they provided.
Well, as total irony would have it, about 4 years ago, he moved into the house right behind ours when I was still living in Texas. And I did let him know the impact. He didn't even remember the offhand comment. I still remembered him.
What is the chance of that? Man.
It was,
So Michael, tell us a little bit about, I know your company has gone through a couple of stages, right? So can you tell us a little bit about what you do with, I guess today with RSJ Technical Consulting?
Okay, I started out doing data services, where contact with companies and actually looking at their data, collecting it from the supply chain, combining it, doing what was needed, and passing it along to their customers. And did that for a number of years, and realized that the data quality was really pretty bad at the start. This is back around 2005. And that's when I realized data had to become a process. And it had to be something that we just didn't say if the person who I gave it to accepted it, it must have been right. It must have been good enough for them.
Yeah.
And so that was the first major change. And I started realizing and put together in 2007 the model that this has to be part of the bigger environmental picture to really understand what you're doing. And that was sort of like the next transformation of what was happening. And that's when I really started getting involved heavily with AIAG.
So
initially, yeah.
So you work with the IMDS, which is the International Material Data System, formed by several of the German car makers, I believe. And is that sort of the impetus for how you make this industry, kind of an industry-wide standard, or how does IMDS play into that?
Okay, in the early days when I first started, we had a little bit with the IMDS system, which is a computer database that allows interconnection while maintaining confidentialities of data along the supply chain. But a good chunk of the industry was still using a spreadsheet approach, which had all kinds of issues, not only being it could be 8 to 10 times as long to handle any specific data request. And as a person who was always fascinated by industrial engineering, obviously you want to push things towards more efficient processes and higher quality processes. And that's when 2005 I came up and gave a presentation to what was then the IMDS IMDS advisory committee to the Automotive Steering Committee out of the U.S. on data quality issues.
Got it.
And you know the old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. After
Right.
presenting information like that, of course, the expectation is to be involved totally and be part of the solution.
Right. That's a good life lesson for people. So what, if you present a problem, be prepared to be a part of the solution, right? Or if you present information, and show your skill, be prepared to have your talent co-opted.
Where possible.
Yeah. So you are, you call yourself managing director. I'm interested in, how you spend your day. Managing director, CEO, president, whatever you call it, it means a lot of different things for people. So tell us a little bit about a day in the life of Michael Wurzman, formerly known as Mike Wurzman, again, part of your efficiency initiative, right? You mentioned earlier was to shorten your name, but I think you realized that for credibility purposes, Michael was more effective. Is that a fair estimation?
Right. The older you get, the more you listen sometimes to the advice of your kids.
There you go. Yeah, so give us an idea of a day in your life, at RSJ.
Okay. I've kept my firm small, and people said, gee, why aren't you doing stuff where we're making all kinds of money on data collection?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer has been because it shouldn't be done the way we're currently doing it. Right now, people outsource it. I'll be honest, that's where I make most of the money between that and training. But it should be part of the core competence and integrated from the design process on in a company. And so with that approach, this is probably a lousy business model, trying to teach people to be self-confident and do the service that you provide. But it's what has to happen for the future. So in the course of my day, I handle certain customers with data requests direct. I like to handle the difficult ones, the ones that are outside the norm, so that I can continually be training and learning and finding out more. So I have the firsthand experience seeing what's going on so I can better advise and give advice. And that takes up a chunk of the day. Needless to say, emails, all the correspondence, and the rest is an overhead I don't like, but I'd probably spend a good hour or two a day researching, just keeping up where things are going, where the trends are, tying it into what are the issues being had by companies, looking at where we need to be going and trying to understand and synthesize the advice. A portion of my day obviously is spent sales, working on bringing in business, and then taking care of the folks that are working with me to be there to handle any technical issues or questions that come up.
So you really are spending a good portion of your day trying to solve this, and everyday life maybe trying to solve this data collection problem. So I have to ask, and I have to ask this, and that is, what do you see as the biggest issue, and what do you see as the biggest opportunity in turn? You said that the way we do data collection is wrong, and that's a bold, and I love that statement. I can't argue that, by the way. But what do you see as the biggest wrong, and what would you see as the biggest opportunity for improving it?
The biggest wrong is that the attitude throughout our whole industry and supply chain is we pull data. We ask and say, I need you to supply it. It must be part of this. As opposed to companies having the data done in a way that can provide a competitive advantage. Now, going back, I have a MBA in sales and marketing, and I realized the integration of that with technical. And as a salesperson, you want to sell quality and value. And we're no longer just selling products in the marketplace as a company, but all this data is required to be part of the product to make the sale. So why shouldn't we be looking at it as one and looking at an approach that creates a data set that has enough value that it will be part of the competitive sales process?
Got it.
In which case, you don't have to worry about collecting data because companies are competing to give you data and make sure their data is of the same quality they compete on the hard part. And that's a whole fundamental change in thinking and a paradigm shift that I'm trying to get across to industry.
So considering all of that, I think of, I'm always trying to kind of understand the superpowers of companies or people or whatever superpowers I define as if I'm walking down the hall, or I would ordinarily say in my business, but right now let's say in my home or my home office or at my dining room table, and I have a pain that is weighing heavily on me as a leader. Let's say I have that pain. What are the key words or the core pain that I'm feeling that helps me understand that you and RSJ Technical can address or solve my problem?
Well, one of the key pains that you're doing is all this IMDS, the reporting work. That's an expense that's bearing on me, especially in today's times where with all the business disruption, it's a part that doesn't go away that we necessarily see an economic value to. And people are looking at, how do I do this cheaper?
Yeah.
And my power is looking at this and saying, you're framing the question wrong. It's about how do I get value that lets me grow my company and make money by doing this. And so I'd like to tell people, get to that point. Now, the key thing that I like to pride my company on is when we do training, when we work with companies, we don't want to show, here is how you do it. We want to convey an understanding of the whys, of the importance, so that there is a framework to build one's thinking and one's approach on. After we work with someone, they understand the bigger picture, how it fits in, so it can solve this problem and look at it as an opportunity to make money instead of a cost they have to cut because times are so tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your approach goes to one of my foundational beliefs, that is collecting or sharing or accumulating data really has to be for a goal-based purpose, not for reporting obligation. And it sounds to me that you're driving your customers more towards that direction, right? Know what you want, and then what data gets you there.
Right now, after that salient event with my house and learning about toxic substances, I've become passionate. In fact, some people say overly passionate about wanting to see the change occur to get these toxic substances, with many of which we don't even know are toxic yet, out of our products and out of the environment so that we can improve the health of the generations to follow. I used to say of my kids, now I say of my grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Michael, I know that your firm works with OEMs and a variety of suppliers across all tiers to help them comply with all the regulations out there really looking to lower short-term compliance risk and costs and a lot more than that. Question for you though. In this day and age where we have so much data at our fingertips, right? It's the information age for sure. Is it, do you find that in your work that you're doing with these groups, is there more or less transparency to getting to the information that they need to understand that impacts their risk and compliance?
There's been a little more transparency. It's going to be changing dramatically, because when you look at the whole picture, we are in a situation where not just getting toxic substance out of exposure, we have to look at where the whole drive is coming out of Europe with the circular economy. And being able to make sure that not only are our products safe from exposure and use, and the chemicals in manufacturing are safe while being handled and used, but that the final products that we manufacture at their end of life, the materials that make it up are reusable into new products. And then taking a look to try to make it where we are looking at that as well as energy consumed, greenhouse gas effects, water, and the rest, so we have a sustainable structure manufacturing-wise. Right now, so much gets thrown away or could be recycled but is not, that it's not going to be sustainable for the long term.
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do to really make strides towards that more circular economy model, including, as you allude to, taking that CE proactively into product design well upstream so that we have more options in the life. All right, so Michael, we're going to pivot away from your good work that you and your team are doing at RSJ Technical Consulting, and I want to go broader with this next question. Obviously the world's changed a lot, has been changing in the last few months globally, but here in the States, by the time this interview publishes, the last 2 months have been extremely challenging. In this, as you look at the global supply chain industry, end-to-end, and the whole circular economy, what trend or development or issue really stands out in your mind that you and your team are spending a lot of time on right now?
Right now, the big issue has been with the implementation of the framework to achieve a circular economy. The first step in the EU was an update of the Waste Framework Directive, which is requiring additional reporting into a database in Europe by the end of the year. And while automotive is ahead of virtually all industries in having that data, we still need work on reformatting and structuring it. And with my clients that are outside automotive, many ignored it because the legislation wasn't being enforced. And they're now realizing, wait a second, we have got to meet this end of the year deadline. Much of our supply chain is shut down. People are not able to get the data, get what we need, and yet we have this looming deadline. And what we are trying to work through is, how do you meet that goal when we're not even sure what the date may be? There's always a chance, because of the virus going around, that it may get delayed and give us more time. But in reality, it's not giving us any more time, because we're losing time due to people not being able to function, do their jobs, collect and gather and report the type of data we need. And this is really creating a lot of angst in the industry. And that's what we need to help them realize. There are solutions or ways to work during this period, how to structure it, how to target. Because many clients I talk to are worried, what happens if I miss the deadline? And the answer is quite simply, this is going to be part of customs. You just don't sell into that market. And that's a scary thought, especially when business is down.
Yeah, and I think, look, I think we've seen that the spirit of government right now, anyway, is to give some leeway in terms of these deadlines, but you can't count on that, right? And what we've seen companies do is to inquire now, right? Inquire earlier. And what we've found is that the agencies that are responding are more than happy to identify a small personal experience. Here in Georgia, we have what we call the birthday penalty, which is that your license plates come due the month of your birthday. And they have delayed that for 2 months. So you're getting some leeway there, but it wasn't really announced. You had to ask. And I think companies will do that. Will need to do that in order to make sure that they're in compliance.
Right. Now, we have to keep in mind the EU has had the assumption we've had the full data in the structure they want now going on 7 years. And because they haven't checked for it in this level, there's an assumption that you shouldn't have to be collecting it in a crisis mode.
Right.
Or reformatting or enhancing it or structuring it.
Yes. Yes, and they're much better with rules and steps and plans and compliance in Europe than we are in the States, undoubtedly. GDPR is a great example. The privacy initiative that they have for individuals is a great example. And there was a similar scramble in the States to comply with that.
Right. Now there is, while we're scrambling on that, we have to keep in mind there's a clause in all this European legislation that it's designed to make the European economy stronger over the long term. Now, in a downturn where everything could be checked at customs, it's not beyond the pale to look that for product entering the EU, it could be used as somewhat of a trade barrier.
Yep.
And it'd be hard to say it's a trade barrier when it's something you supposedly were already doing for 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Well, we've definitely got to pay strong attention to that. And I know that you and I know that AIAG are and other organizations are contributing, and that's part of the reason that we're talking is to get the industry aware of this. You might or might not be aware, Michael, that this event, the AIAG Summit, is now no charge to attend virtually. And so I think the hope is that more and more people from the industry will attend. So maybe let's shift gears a little bit towards that. And you had shared some interesting thoughts about the value of AIAG and organizations like that. But tell us a little bit about your personal feelings about the Automotive Industry Action Group and what you get out of it, and what you see as the value of an organization like this.
Well, the beauty of AIG is they're structured to be a collaborative effort towards problem solving. And I've come in with my expertise working to help solve and drive part of the problem, drive a solution to the problems that I see. But also by getting involved, and I've been very heavily involved now for a number of years, I can participate in a number of additional work groups that I may not have time to take a leadership role or be in, but I can learn through my participation. And what I found is when you actively participate and contribute in a group, and then are in other ones you can learn, and you actually can learn through the sharing of information even more than you contribute. And so even though I spend a large amount of time in various meetings and activities with AIAG, it has dramatically helped me in putting the entire picture and the understanding for being able to direct and guide people to solutions and work through an organization the way it's structured, like AIAG, I think can be invaluable to companies.
It's the old adage, right? You get tenfold what you give, essentially.
Oh, absolutely, within this organization.
So to our listeners, you can, of course, learn more about AIAG at aiag.org. We're talking about the Automotive Industry Action Group. And Michael, we want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you and learn more about your firm. So please share.
Okay, the best way is we have a web presence at www.rsjtechnical.com. And from there are links where you can get in touch with us, and we encourage you to do so. And we'll be glad to talk to you about how we can help, how we can try to teach companies how they can turn this into a competitive advantage to grow in a marketplace, especially one of uncertainty.
Great point. You know, Greg, as we learned Michael's story today, as much of a story we can get to in 40 minutes or so, two big takeaways for me. Number one, to turn a personal tragedy into a business success, and to do so without, you know, really drowning in what's devastating, right? When you lose your house and everything you own. So that really sticks out in my mind. And then secondly, it's clear, it's unmistakable. Michael loves what he does. He's got a passion for helping companies get better, helping companies get the information they look for, doing the research. I mean, he was born to do this, Greg.
Well, like a lot of people who have these kind of gifts, the solution finds you in a way. I mean, he presented so much value. Michael, you presented so much value to your brother-in-law's client that, you know, they basically pulled you into your business after someone who didn't even remember the comment that they made, which is so often. It's amazing how often somebody changes somebody's life, and it's amazingly meaningful to that person. But as you said, a cast-off comment for that person, just the string of events that led you here and the passion and skill that you present here is inspiring.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to say that about data, Michael, but it's true. It is an amazing story.
So thank you, Michael. Thank you for taking time out of a busy environment for everyone right now. We've been chatting with Michael Wurzman, founder and president at RSJ Technical Consulting, which of course, as he shared, stands for his three children, Rachel, Stephanie, and Joshua. Michael, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. A pleasure doing this.
Terrific. Stay safe, and we will be reconnecting with you shortly. And we're going to wrap up here, so stay with us just as we wrap up this episode. Again, you can connect with Michael Wurzman on LinkedIn or check out their firm at rsjtechnical.com. Big thanks to Michael and his team. Greg, another great episode. You know, I love. This is kind of a different angle than a lot of our recent episodes, right?
Yeah, it is, and I think it's interesting. Look, like we've talked about, Jim and Tanya and the crew at AIAG, they provide a tremendous service to the automotive industry. Obviously, a difficult time for that industry now, and you know, for everyone, of course. But having groups like this and having people like Michael and Jim and Tanya dedicated to your success, I think bodes well for the industry.
Agreed. Great point. And on that, we're going to wrap up here today. To our audience, be sure to check out a wide variety of industry thought leadership at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Check out our upcoming webinar on global visibility that's coming up, well, here in mid-April. I hope you'll join us for that. On behalf of our entire team, Scott Luton wishing you a successful week ahead. Stay safe. Don't panic. Please follow the expert advice and precautions that have been disseminated. And know this, that brighter days lie ahead. We're going to see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.